Okay, everybody, thanks so much for joining today's webinar to talk about Illinois' net metering transition happening at the end of this calendar year. We do have quite a few folks registered for the webinar, so I just want to give it another minute and let folks get in the room from their last call to ensure that everybody hears all of our words of wisdom on this subject. So if folks could just hang on for another minute, that would be great. Well, actually, while we wait for everybody to get in the room, I'm just going to read ISEA's antitrust. As a trade association of competitors, ISEA must comply with and be mindful of antitrust laws. It is important that competitively sensitive matters are not discussed on this call, including product price or cost, sales terms and conditions, production levels, sales territories, marketing plans, industry forecasts, or bid terms. If any such topic is raised, I will stop the conversation, and if necessary, we'll have to end the call. So let's not go there. Looks like we have about half the people who have registered for the webinar in attendance. So thanks everybody for being who are here in a timely manner. As you can tell by the title slide, this is a collaboration between the Illinois Solar Energy and Storage Association and National Solar Energy Industries Association. So we're happy to have the opportunity to work together to ensure that we have all the news that's fit to print about this transition and our attempts to make it as smooth as possible. We do have a couple of some experts on the call with us today, so hopefully we can get to the majority of your questions. But right now, I want to introduce my colleague, Andrew Linares, who's the Senior Manager for SEIA for the Central Region. And Andrew, I'm going to hand the mic to you to introduce the rest of our participants today, our presenters today.
Thank you very much, Leslie. My name's Andrew Linares. As she said, I'm the Senior Manager for the Central Region, or the Midwest, which essentially includes Michigan, the Great Lakes, Illinois, and a few other Midwestern states. I'm just about a month in with SEIA, and this is one of the major issues we've been working on, figuring out the net metering transition for Illinois. So I'm happy to be here to update you all on what we've been working on. I also want to give a quick intro to the experts we have on this call who are going to be presenting to us and making themselves available for your questions. And first, I want to introduce Nikhil Vijaykar, who represents community choice aggregation providers, clean energy companies, transportation sector clients, and advocates in administrative litigation, rulemaking, and other regulatory matters. Mr. Vijaykar practices include litigation, electric and gas rate cases, energy efficiency and demand response cases, net metering and community renewables cases, and transportation electrification cases, among others. Mr. Vijaykar's practices also involve counseling clients on a range of energy and utility law issues, as well as the development and implementation of policies advancing distributed energy resource deployment. So we're very lucky to have Nikhil with us. He'll be presenting on a few slides and then taking your questions. But also briefly, I want to mention that we have representatives from Ameren, Illinois and ComEd on with us. Peter Milberg is here representing Ameren, Illinois as the Senior Manager for Regulatory Compliance. He's provided regulatory support for distributed generation and net metering issues. And that includes workshop sessions, interconnection rules, net metering tariffs, and also things like the ICC's value of DER proceedings, the data access proceedings, and the multi-year integrated grid plan dockets. So thank you, Peter, for being here. We also have Dan Gable as the Director of Transmission and Distribution for ComEd in the Project and Contract Management Organization. Dan directs a group of professionals who are responsible for the safe, efficient, and reliable interconnection of generators, renewables, and other DERs to ComEd's electric transmission and distribution system. So thank you, Dan, for being here. And I believe we're ready to hand over to Nikhil. So
yeah,
take it away.
Andrew, I'm sorry. I missed a little bit of housekeeping, so sorry to interrupt. Everybody, just want to let everybody know that you're all on mute, and that's because we have over 100 people registered today. As you think of your questions during Nikhil's presentation, please put them in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. But hopefully, he'll have answered the majority of those before we get to the end of the presentation. So I think that's it. So Nikhil, now you can take it away.
Thanks, Leslie, and thanks, Andrew. I appreciate the introduction. I was just taking a quick look at the participant list today, and I recognized some familiar names, folks with whom I've worked previously on related issues. So it's good to see you all on and everybody else who's joined today's webinar. Like Andrew said, I'm Nikhil Vijaykar. I'm partner at Keys and Fox, and I represent some of the trades in Illinois that work together regularly as the joint solar parties in a series of regulatory matters before the Illinois Commerce Commission, including matters related to net metering and sort of solar compensation and solar policy more broadly. I am excited to talk to you all about net metering transition related issues. I understand that the issues at play here are of great interest, maybe even concern to many of you. And I know folks have a lot of questions, so I don't want to take up all of our time going through a bunch of slides. I'll try to be brief, and then I'll try to open it up for questions. And then, of course, we'll try to answer as many of those questions as I can. And I should say thank you also to echoing thanks to Peter and Dan from Ameren and ComEd, respectively, for joining and being willing to field some questions as well. So let me get started, and I'm looking off to the side because that's where I have the presentation that I'm going to walk through. So got this. That's me. So net metering in Illinois, and this is, of course, a very familiar policy to all of you. It's been a foundational policy for the solar industry in Illinois, and it's been around for over a decade now. Certain aspects of how net metering works in Illinois have changed over the years, but the core mechanics have remained the same, and that's that customers have been credited for their generation at the retail rate, either by using their generation to directly offset on-site load, or by netting exported electricity against the electricity that the customer consumes from the grid over the monthly billing period. Now, to the extent that customers generated surplus electricity, so more than the energy they consume from the grid over the monthly billing period, those surplus credits have rolled over to the following billing period, and again, serve to offset usage sort of at the full retail rate level. I know you all are very familiar with retail net metering, so I know I don't need to spend more time on that. So let's talk about the net metering transition and just a quick bit of history, only because some of what was put in place by FEJA, the Future Energy Jobs Act, impacts what we will be talking about today. The Future Energy Jobs Act initiated the transition from the familiar net metering policy to something a little bit different, something a little more sophisticated. FEJA importantly introduced the concept of what are colloquially or generally known as smart inverter rebates. Those rebates are upfront dollar per kilowatt payments to distributed solar facilities, or initially at least only to distributed solar facilities, and in particular, those facilities installing smart inverters. Initially, those rebates were not available to residential customers, only to community solar and large commercial and industrial customers. That has changed, and we'll get to that in a minute. What FIJA also did was create sort of a statutory $250 per kilowatt value for the rebates, and establish that customers that received a rebate would no longer receive netting of delivery service charges. And this is a concept that's important to understand. I'm sure most of you on this call understand it very well, but just to be extra sure, in Illinois, you have customers have their supply charges, and they have delivery charges. And what receiving a rebate would do is replace your netting of delivery service charges for net metering purposes, but not the customer's netting of their supply charges. So in a sense, the rebates were supposed to stand in for delivery charge netting. FIJA also imagined that those initial statutory rebate values would be replaced with a more refined value once the commission had an opportunity to investigate the value that solar and other distributed energy resources provide to the grid. And we'll get to that process in a couple slides.
Hey, Nikhil, very quickly to interrupt. Yeah, could you try to zoom out or something that would show the whole slide?
Oh, yeah, I see the problem. Give me a second. Is that better?
Yes, I think that does it.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so part two to the net metering transition, that's CEJA, the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which was enacted a couple of years ago. CEJA made major changes to the net metering framework overall, and specifically to the net metering transition and how all of it works. And I want to highlight three issues in particular that CEJA introduced. So first of all, CEJA gave the distribution utilities, that's ComEd and Ameren, more responsibility over net metering, notwithstanding the customer's supplier, right? Whether the customer was served by an Aries, an alternative retail electric supplier, or by the distribution utility. For example, the distribution utility now has the responsibility to process net metering applications. Second, CEJA introduced the concept of rebates not only for distributed solar facilities, but also for energy storage systems. And it also made the existing distributed solar rebates immediately available to residential customers. Third, CEJA abandoned the prior approach to that threshold at which Illinois would leave full retail net metering behind and introduced a date certain for that transition. And that date certain is January 1, 2025, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. And the idea here was to create more certainty and allow a uniform and predictable statewide transition from full retail net metering to value-based rebates. So that brings me to what happens on January 1, 2025, which I know is of concern to many of on this call. So the January 1, 2025, obviously a critical date. And I think before we talk about exactly what happens, I sort of want to lay some context here. So first of all, it's a critical date specifically for residential and small commercial customers. Those are the customers who currently under existing retail net metering receive delivery charge netting, and would not receive delivery charge netting following January 1, 2025, were they to apply for net metering on or after January 1, 2025. Now, what January 1, 2025 means as far as bill credits and retail and net metering, and what it means as far as rebates, are a little bit different. So as far as bill credits go, customers applying for net metering on or after January 1, 2025 will no longer be eligible to receive full retail net metering. Instead, those customers will receive what I'll call supply charge only netting. And what that means is the customer would be able to continue to offset consumption behind the meter with generation behind the meter. But as far as their exported electricity goes, those exports would be netted against their consumption from the grid only for the purposes of offsetting their supply charges, but not their delivery charges. And then to the extent that the customer has excess or surplus credits, they would still be able to roll those credits onto subsequent bills, but the customer would elect to receive either a kilowatt hour or a monetary credit on their bill. As far as rebates go, customers will still be eligible to receive rebates on January 1, 2025. They will receive rebates. Those rebates will be at the current values, but those rebate values will only change following the conclusion of the ICC's ongoing investigation into the value of DER, which I'll describe in an upcoming slide. So I referenced the current rebate values, and those are here on this slide. These are rebate values defined by statute. Again, the purpose of the ICC's investigation into the value of DER is to update those rebate values, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that investigation means and where it's going and all of that in a minute. But I wanted for folks to know what those rebate values are currently. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about move away from talking about rebates and talk specifically about net metering and what it takes for a customer or their developer to get that customer into what I'm calling here legacy net metering treatment. And what I'm really referring to is the current approach to net metering, which is full retail net metering. So Ameren and ComEd have clarified the documentation that a customer or the developer must submit prior to January 1, 2025 in order for the customer to receive legacy net metering treatment. At a very high level, the customer must complete installation, testing, and final inspection for their systems and submit all of the associated documentation to their distribution utility, so ComEd and Ameren, before 5 p.m. Central, so the end of the day, on December 31st, 2024. And the specific documentation that the customer or their developer submits to the distribution utility is a little bit different depending on whether you're in ComEd service territory or in Ameren's. Let me put up those requirements so people have a complete understanding of exactly what we're talking about. In ComEd service territory, what the developer would be doing would be submitting the certificate of completion form through the interconnection portal. Include the documentation that would typically be provided as a photo showing the nameplate, model and serial number of the inverter, an inspection form if the local authority required it, file listing the serial numbers of the microinverters if those are installed, and then the battery nameplate if a storage system is installed. I think a lot of those will be familiar to the folks on this call. In Ameren service territory, it's similar but different. The customer or the developer would submit the construction complete form in Ameren's Power Clerk interconnection portal. And again, for that submission to be complete, it would have to include photos of signage and placarding, proof of insurance, installer certification, and a signed approved inspection from the local authority having jurisdiction. Okay, so I know that there's going to be some questions about the legacy net metering treatment aspect of all of this, and I'm looking forward to hearing those. I do want to talk really quickly about the value of DER investigation and rebates and that part of the compensation story. So the ICC is currently carrying out an investigation into the value of and compensation for DERs. As I mentioned a couple slides ago, on or after January 1, 2025, the currently available rebate values will remain in effect. And I say that because that investigation into the value of DER is sort of still pending with the ICC, and the ICC is still making its way through the investigation. Once the investigation does in fact conclude, the ICC is expected to update rebate values, and it's also expected to consider additive services compensation for DER. So new rebate values and potentially new compensation via what's called additive services. I want to be clear that there's no defined deadline for the completion of that investigation, but that at some point in the future, once that investigation concludes, the rebate values that are currently available and in statute will change. And then one last note that I think Leslie suggested that I include based on some feedback that we've received from folks in the industry, and that's, how does all of this interact with time of use rates? And I just want to make a couple points about that. So first of all, and this is true today, but net metering customers are permitted to be on time of use rates today. And the way that the net metering mechanics work for those customers is a little bit different than the way that net metering mechanics work for customers who are on non-time variant rates. But they're permitted to be on those rates today. That'll continue to be true for customers who apply for net metering on or after January 1, 2025. The other way in which the net metering transition interacts with time of use rates that I wanted to mention is that customers that do decide to take an energy storage rebate in particular, so a rebate for their energy storage systems, those customers are subject to additional requirements. And if you're a residential or a small commercial customer, the requirement is that you must participate in a peak time rebate program, an hourly pricing program, or a time of use rate program offered by the distribution utility. So those offerings are a little bit different depending on whether you're in Ameren service territory or in ComEd service territory, but that's a requirement that kicks in if you are a customer that's electing to receive an energy storage rebate. So that's all I wanted to mention on the time of use rate aspect of all of this. Again, stepping back here, thinking through net metering transition issues more broadly, Leslie and Andrew have put together a series of useful additional resources that we would encourage you to check out. But I will stop there with my presentation portion of all of this. Turn it back to Leslie and Andrew if they have anything to add, and then take questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Nikhil. That was really, I thought, very, very clear. So hopefully folks were following along well. I just wanted to point out a couple of the additional resources. I included the historical pricing that can be found for both utilities on the Plug-in Illinois ARES website. So that's a resource where we can figure out what supply has looked like over a good period of time. Also, both the ComEd and Ameren net metering pages are linked there as well. But I wanted to highlight the Solar Powers Illinois net metering page. And Nicola, would you mind sharing that page so folks can take a look? Can you share your screen?
I'll stop my share.
Oh, good. That's great. So I just wanted to point out this resource. This is Solar Powers Illinois is a brand that was put together by the 3 trade associations that comprise the joint solar parties. So that's National SEIA, Illinois Solar Energy and Storage Association, as well as CCSA, the Coalition for Community Solar Access. So we share some resources, such as our regulatory attorneys like Nikhil, as well as Hawthorne Strategy Group that works on our PR and media outreach. and Hawthorne developed this Solar Powers Illinois website for the trade associations, and worked to develop this landing page that has a lot of great information about Illinois' net metering transition. So Dan Kowalski from Hawthorne, who's their managing supervisor, was going to kind of just walk us through what the opportunities are to find information about the transition here on this website. Dan, do you want to let us know about this work?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Nikhil, for the walkthrough on net metering and what's transitioning here. As Leslie teed up, solarpowersillinois.com is a great resource for the solar industry and to raise awareness on the benefits of solar. As part of this, we've developed this landing page that's kind of a split for both consumers to find information on what is happening with the transition, as well as installers. So probably everybody here will kind of fall into that category today, would be my presumption. So I think if we click on the for installers route, that'll kind of take us to the next step here. And it'll kind of cascade down into more information. So quickly up at the front, it clarifies there just exactly what is changing. It reiterates the date, some of the new information, documentation that needs to be provided, and by the deadline for it, as well as some additional information. We do have some language in there that you'll see for a toolkit that is currently being developed. So we'll have a button right above the little countdown timer to download the toolkit. And then we'll have additional resources for you, such as FAQs, some talking points, and how to read in your teams and or your customers, how to speak to your customers about the transition and what is happening, and other helpful materials to assist you with this transition. The next section kind of goes over quick brief, what you need to know. So, obviously the Illinois is sunsetting net metering. Then the next one is reiterating that net metering is not going away. So hitting on the legacy customer portion, and then talking about the deadline, again, reiterating the timing of it, and the key materials that need to be completed to meet the deadline. The next section kind of outlines some recommended talking points for you all to communicate to customers. So again, reiterating the timeline, deadline, what is needed for that. Really kind of hedging that with your customers to realistic expectations. So even if these are submitted on time, there are a number of variables that are at play that could result in not hitting the deadline. So just kind of being realistic with what expectations are for the customers, especially as there is likely to be, or may already be, an additional rush to install solar to try and get on retail net metering. This also has some information about the DG and storage rebate on here as well. We have put this in there as at a 300 mark, assuming that it's the residential solar is what will be taking advantage of these rebates here. And then further down, we have a nice little graphic that has kind of the quick bullets on what is needed for both ComEd customers and for Ameren customers. And the final section there is just kind of highlighting what are some of the key differences with smart solar billing, or and so kind of what everything that Nikhil was saying. So the credits apply to different portion of the customer's bill, use the new dynamic supply pricing, reiterating that customers on smart solar billing can still access those existing one-time use rebates. So the DG, smart inverter rebate, and the storage rebate, and then quick examples of what those rebates entail. And sorry, my apologies. The final section here is the FAQs. So we put together, brainstormed a bunch of questions that we anticipated that you all may have. And then I think, Nicola, if you click on any one of those, it should take you to another page. And it should scroll down automatically to where that question is to help out with that. And all these questions are fleshed out here as well. So please feel free to explore this and take a look through. I know there's been some questions submitted today ahead of the webinar. We'll keep an eye out for any of the questions that are being submitted live here, and then any more that may come through afterwards to see if we want to add onto this FAQ section. to make sure that everybody is reading from the same script. And that's pretty much it for the installer portion. The consumer portion is runs very and tracks very closely to what we just walked through, except for more so on the consumer side, as it says. So that's just more so of like what they need to know and kind of prompts them on what they're going to ask for you. So making sure that they speak to their solar installer to be up to speed on what's happening and what's new with the transition and how it may impact their unique situation. And then kind of gives them a heads up on what are some of the materials that they need to work with you all to make sure that they can try to get on net metering. Again, not guaranteeing that they'll be able to be on net metering, but encouraging them if they would like to try to meet the deadline, here's what needs to happen. And they have their own set of FAQs as well. So stay tuned on the website. Sorry
to interrupt, Dan. Yeah, this is a great resource. Just a really wonderful opportunity for both consumers as well as the industry to be able to find all the news that's fit to print and make sure we're all rowing in the same direction and have all the resources that we need. So thanks to Hawthorne for their due diligence and getting it up right in the nick of time. So yeah, I think we finalized that this morning. So it's very, very exciting. So I think I'm really happy we have a lot of time for questions. So we have about half our time left for questions, and I see a lot of activity in the chat. We also did take questions in the registration form. I think some of those probably have been answered by Nikhil's presentation, but Andrew is going to take the reins for leading us through the questions, and we've got the team here to be able to hopefully answer everything that you're wondering about. I think I have one more thing, sorry. We are recording today, and we will share the recording as well as the slides following the presentation with the memberships. So if you haven't been taking great notes, you can review later. So Andrew, I know there's some activity happening in the chat. We've got some people wondering about a few things.
Yes, and I will try to tackle some of the questions in the chat here first. And if we neglect to answer it, please re-enter it, and we'll try to get to that. I did see a question about whether these slides will be shared. Yes, we are recording this webinar, and we'll be sharing the slides, and also getting out a link to you to the landing page and some of the resources that Dan was just sharing. I saw a question about third-party suppliers. Lauren Fernandez, you had a question about for ratepayers who receive supply from a third-party supplier, if they install solar under the supply-only netting program, the new program, are they receiving an export credit from the third party? Is the credit third party's rate or the IOU's price to compare? So this is basically a question about third party arrangements. Nikhil, do you have any response to that question and how that will work?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and thanks for the question, Lauren. So under net metering, right? So we're talking about behind the meter facilities as opposed to community solar crediting, right? Which is a very different beast. But under net metering, the supply credit that you receive corresponds to your supply charges. So if you're getting service from an Aries, an alternative retail suppliers, your Aries supply charges. If you're getting your service from the utility default service, then it's those supply charges. And so it's not pegged to the price to compare, which is a concept that CJ introduced for community solar crediting. So I just wanted to make sure that was cleared up. Andrew,
Yeah.
do you want me to just move to through the next questions, or do you want to?
Sure, if you want. Yeah, I think I saw a
Yeah, that
question
makes good
about
sense.
customers, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so the next question that I see in the chat is from Aaron Phillips, and the question is, are storage customers required to move to real-time pricing if they don't want to take advantage of the storage rebates? Thanks for the question. The answer is no. Right now, the eligibility requirements for and so I'm reading into your question a little bit, but assuming that this is a storage customer that is also a DG customer, so it's a coupled system, that DG customer can be, on regular old non-time variant rates, or can be on time variant rates, but there's no requirement that they participate in time variant rates if they're not taking a storage rebate, notwithstanding their choice to take a DG rebate or not. And I should say, since Peter and Dan are on, please don't hesitate to correct me if you have a different view of the utilities requirements and so on and so forth.
Nikhil, not a correction, but you listed it in your presentation that if they do take the storage rebate, there are options in Ameren, Illinois. There's options beyond simply time of use rates. There are demand response programs that the customer could also enroll in. So they just have to take advantage of one of them. We don't require them to take a specific program. So that just supplementing your answer there, Nikhil.
Yeah, great clarification.
Really quickly, I wanted to, in case there are folks that don't have their computer in front of them or joining by phone, there was a question about Power Clerk, and it's showing that the for Ameren, the install has to be complete and inspected by December 13th rather than the 31st. And Peter for Ameren, Illinois, confirmed in the chat that they just haven't updated that yet on Power Clerk, and indeed it is the 31st. So I wanted to go ahead and say that aloud. The next question I see has to do with, let's see, from Lisa Albrecht. For ComEd, will the rebate application be integrated into the interconnection and net metering application process? Currently, installers and applicants need to go to different application page to complete as a separate process. It would be useful if this could be a checkbox confirming customer. So, ComEd.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
That's certainly something we're looking at, how we can further integrate that. We saw the benefits from integrating the net metering with the interconnection application a few years back, and we're looking to see how we could do something similar with DG rebate.
Great, thank you. Here's an interesting question from Garrison Regal. Question whether if a homeowner with current, with the legacy net metering sells their home in the new year, will the new owner lose out on full retail net metering? Is net metering tied to the meter, or is it tied to the account holder?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and I appreciate the question, Garrison. I just read it and I'm trying to rack my brain. So Peter and Dan, please correct me if you the answer to this. But my recollection is that following CEJA, your net metering status follows the premise, and sort of if ownership changes, you don't lose it. That was something new that CJ introduced. I see Peter shaking his head, so I feel like I'm on firm ground. But please, add any color to that if I'm missing something.
No, you're spot on. The color I wanted to add is, and it's in fact, may I share my screen here? I want to show you the language. Excuse me. I want to show you the language for Ameren, Illinois tariff. And let's see. Well, I can't figure out how to do it. So anyway, we'll just forget about that. But if you look at Ameren, Illinois tariff, we specifically state, and Nikhil, basically your attorney played a big role in this. I remember the conversations with Nikhil about making sure this was clarified. But the language not only says it stays at the premises, but we also run it for the life of the generator at the premises, which we define in tariff as 30 years. The reason we put a specific year in there was there's questions about, well, if the inverter fails after 11 years, does that mean the system's lifetime is over? So rather than deal with issues like that, we just all agreed 30 years basically for us from the date of the witness test. The one caveat you have to be aware of is there's nothing that prevents a homeowner who previously did not get a rebate and wouldn't select a generation rebate because they didn't want to lose delivery services from applying and getting a rebate right before they sell the property, just to maximize their return on their property. If that happens, then the succeeding customer would not get the delivery netting. They would be shifted over to the supply and transmission netting only. So just Nikhil's answer was spot on. I just wanted to add a little more color to it.
Yeah, and I see Lisa made a follow-up comment to that about the change of name form, which I believe is the case. I'm not as familiar with that side of things here, but I believe there is some process to update the name on the account to transfer over the net metering.
We have a question here from Daniel Pertwee from Palmetto Solar, and he's asking what the frequency of the netting interval is under supply-only netting for billing purposes. Are imports, exports read and netting for billing purposes instantaneously or over a set interval, such as 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour? I don't know if anybody is prepared to speak to the netting interval question.
Yeah, it's basically it's whatever they're buying supply from, right? So if you're receiving power, buying power on an hourly basis, we net it on an hourly basis. If you're just getting on a per kilowatt hour basis, that's just calculated over the entirety of the billing period. So it's just whatever the in outs are for the total month. And again, this is just for Ameren supply. It's supposed to work that way for third-party suppliers as well. But third-party suppliers can also have their own one-off arrangements with customers should the customer enter into it. But generally speaking, the interval of netting matches the interval of the supply service calculation period.
Daniel, did you have a further question? I think you can unmute if you wanted to respond back.
Hey, thanks.
Okay. I just want to make sure you could unmute. Go ahead, Dan.
Yep, I was able to. Thank you. Yes, this is Dan Perry with Palmetto Solar. Just following up on that. So if you're saying the supply service could be on a monthly interval for some proportion of customers, wouldn't that mean that then if they produced, say, what they consumed in a month, that there'd be some portion of that production that's still being compensated at the retail rate? We were under the impression this is a much shorter netting interval that was being calculated as opposed to monthly netting.
No, that's not correct. If you look at our tariffs, and again, our tariffs follow what Illinois law says. And again, keep in mind, this is behind the meter. I'm not talking about community solar. For behind the meter, for Ameren, Illinois, there are two supply choices, and they mirror what's in the law. The law talks about time of use, which for us is hourly, and it's priced on the day-ahead hourly basis, or fixed price, which is the same price per kilowatt hour for the entire monthly billing period. And those timeframes are used to calculate the netting of supply and transmission charges for the customer for their bill. Essentially, with the hourly customers, you end up netting like 720, 730 times a month. You have to compare in and out and apply the price that's in effect at that time. But again, it's something that's been in effect since 2008, basically.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to add to Peter. That's a good point. That the way that and maybe this will help clear up what I hear in Daniel's question, which is this isn't really changing. The way that this works isn't changing in 2025. Netting and the netting interval in Illinois has been on the monthly billing period, right? If you're a non-time variant customer, let's put aside the time variant customer for a second here, but for the non-time variant customer on Ameren or ComEd default supply, you're getting net metering, you're getting netting on that monthly billing period basis. In a under the current framework, that excess electricity, right, would those credits would apply to both supply charges and delivery charges on that next bill, right, or on your current bill. Like they would be offsetting usage for the purposes of both sets of charges. What will change now is that those credits, those exports, those will really only apply against supply charges, not against your delivery charges. But again, the netting period hasn't changed. So hopefully that clarifies. And the same is true, by the way, for the time variant hourly customers. It's just the netting happens much more often because your rate is changing much more often.
Okay. There's a question here from Dan Magistrelli, and he's asking for ComEd under the new net metering program. Can you confirm if excess generation net metering credits will no longer expire annually in April or October? Thought I remembered reading that in one of ComEd's announcements. Thank you.
So
Yep.
I don't have the answer top of mind. I actually did chat one of our colleagues in regulatory. If I get the answer before the end of the call, I'll drop in the chat here.
Okay. So Lisa is asking a question here that I might just try to bundle into a number of other questions we've gotten. She's asking if there are templates or models to help ensure that all installers are calculating savings uniformly. I can see folks having some confusion on ways of crunching that math. I mean, there's other people that have been asking how salespeople are supposed to estimate ROI under the new supply only credit and similar questions. We realize this is a change to how folks have been doing business under traditional net metering. I don't believe there is any sort of uniform or agreed to way. I mean, this is going to vary from company to company, but if there's anyone on that would like to speak to this about different ways or a standard way of estimating customer savings here, please do. But I believe the answer is no, there's no uniform way.
Yeah, I don't think that there is anything. I was sort of hoping maybe the membership might have an idea about that. That's not something that we've had been able to develop. So yeah.
One of the questions this is one of the pre-submitted questions from Kirsten Sheets with Trajectory. She's asking about whether there are differences between Ameren and ComEd in this transition. I heard ComEd would be moving customers automatically into Power Smart pricing, but did not hear that action being taken by Ameren Illinois. What other differences are there? And this may be an opportunity, Nikhil, maybe for you to summarize and maybe an invite for Peter and Dan to summarize the differences between the companies in terms of what is needed to get that certificate of completion. But just first, in response to Kirsten's question, automatic moving customers into the Power Smart pricing and rate design here. Dan, if you wanted to talk about that very, very briefly. Maybe there's nothing to be said there. I mean, that's more of a rate design issue. I don't believe that is implicated by this net metering transition, but if you
unfortunately I don't have the answer to that. I'm not the rate design expert for ComEd.
Okay. Nikhil, could you briefly discuss what we've kind of arrived at in terms of the documentation needed and the differences between ComEd and Ameren Illinois?
Muted. Yeah, sure thing, Andrew. So let me just put those slides up again so people can look at that on their screens. Um, here we go. All right, you can see my screen, right? So, well, let me just start off right off the bat. One difference between the two is that in Ameren service territory got a request witness test, whereas it's not required in comment service territory. In comment service territory, here's ComEd's description of the documentation that the customer or developer would have to submit through the interconnection portal. And the customer submits all of these forms, all of this documentation, it would be considered complete, and then ComEd would take it from there. Dan, do
Right.
anything you want to add there?
Just a couple of additional pieces. So everything you said is completely accurate. The form itself, the certificate of completion form is an online form in interconnection portal. And these are the documents that need to be submitted along with it, just to validate that the system installed was in fact the same as the system that was applied for. And one other clarification is we do recognize that certain applications or certain facilities may need a distribution system upgrade, perhaps a transformer recreator or something like that. And with the current proposed December 31st deadline, it doesn't mean that all those distribution system upgrades need to be completed as well. We just need the interconnection customer or their contractor to submit that proof of site completion, if you will, by the 5 p.m. deadline on the 31st. In other words, those photos, the receipts, those types of things need to be uploaded into the interconnection portal, recognizing that the certificate of completion will actually come later once the distribution upgrades are complete. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And then here's the Ameren requirements, which, many of which are pretty similar to what is in comments territory, but Peter, any color you want to add to these specific pieces of documentation?
No, that's the standard stuff, right? Like ComEd, Ameren, Illinois wanted to make sure that we weren't an impediment to developers meeting the deadline. We understand you have other challenges out there, but we just require the paperwork. It's the same things same information that you submit today, same processes. All we're saying is that we're not going to need to do a witness test before the end of the year to get all this done. So just get the paper, get the construction complete. I guess, yeah, now that I think about it, there is one thing, we do a witness test. And while we're not going to require perfection, meaning that if we go out and do the witness test and we discover there's something not that's incomplete or inconsistent that needs to be done before a completed witness test, before we say that it's got permission to operate. What we do on our witness test is we do tell people what failed. And I mean, the extreme case is if we go out and we discover someone's put boxes up with no wires in it, it's failing. We're not going to count that as being done before the end of the year. But if it's something where, say that a sign is in the wrong location, something like that, we're not going to say, oh, you failed the witness test, you don't get a B on net metering as of the end of the year. So just keep doing what your teams are doing, complete the construction, get the necessary paperwork, get that submitted to us by 5 o'clock, and you'll be good, and your customers will be good.
So that request, Peter, that request for a witness test, though, would have to be part of what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the request has to be submitted. Yeah, but don't, again, just because we're not going to do the witness test by the 31st, don't let that cause any concern. To Nikhil's point, all we ask is that you submit the paperwork, including the request for us to perform the witness test. Get that in by 5 o'clock, And again, you and your customers will be good for full netting from that point forward.
Really quickly, want to circle back to the question about net metering staying with the premises according to the compensation model that was originally there. Is that the same? We heard from Ameren. Is that the same for comment territory? Dan, if you wanted to weigh in there, I believe the answer is yes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I thought I answered that earlier. But yeah, that is the same.
Okay. Let's see. And Lisa and Nikhil, feel free to help me out about something that we might have missed. There's a question about time of use. If a customer's on time of use and receiving cash credit compensation, will the surplus build up and compensate the delivery as taxes, fees? Also, for comment, I believe those cash credits do not expire. Is that still true? That's a question from Noah.
Yeah, and for no, I'm gonna have to take that question back to our reg team and our tariff experts on this one. I don't have the answer to that one.
So just if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's, following January 1, 2025, for a customer that's taking, net metering, so that customer is on supply only netting, but is on time of use rates and has surplus credits at the end of a billing period. In other words, more exported electricity than their consumption from the grid over the period of that month, then are those surplus credits going to be, and they elect a monetary credit, are those surplus credits going to then offset their delivery charges and their taxes and fees? I think that's the question. I think the answer to that question is no, that those credits would, under supply only netting, apply against supply charges, but not against delivery charges. But if I'm misunderstanding Noah, please, misunderstanding the question, please correct me.
Yeah, Nikhil, actually, if you read the tariffs, if you read the law, once it turns into a monetary credit, I believe after the supply charges are satisfied, any excess monies for Ameren, Illinois could be used to offset other charges on the bill. Hold on here, just let me verify. Yeah, again, this is not changing. Okay, this is one of the things that doesn't change. So if it's there now, but there is the ability, for once the supply credits are go to offset any of the supply charges, it does turn into that monetary value is available to be applied to other charges on the bill. And again, it's that gets a little funky again when you have a third-party supplier that's not being that's not under UCB POR, the consolidated billing that we've had in place for a decade now, because we won't know what excess credits the supplier calculates. So if they do options that don't involve us doing the bill. So again, this is something that it's not changed from the way it is now. That's CEJA, get my acronyms correct, did not change that at all. So whatever was in place before with regard to that netting stays in place. And there's
Lisa, did you have, yeah.
I just wanted to add, I
something?
did have a lengthy conversation with the green team yesterday on the ComEd side. And if you select, so at the time of energizing your system, you'll either select whether you want to take a monetary credit on each bill or if you want to take the rolling kilowatt hour credits, and please correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly, but this is my understanding yesterday, is once you elect for either of those, if you did elect for the monetary credit, then those dollars are applied to whatever your balance due is. If you decide that you want to roll your kilowatt hours forward, then you'll discontinue the way that we have rollovers today. And then when you have a surplus of kilowatt hours, it'll be applied to your bill as needed. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over time with electrification, because currently we generate more in the summer and we use down, but we could start to see load shifting where people are using more in the winter if they've got electric heat. So it'll be really interesting to see. I'm not sure if feels a little 50-50 as to which one is better, a kilowatt hour rollover or a dollar rollover. Probably just depends on, people's cash flow preferences.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. That's a feature that CJ, like Nikhil, I think touched on this before, that CJ brought into play, where customers now can choose the ability to either do a one-to-one or the monetary credit, 1 kilowatt hour. And Lisa, since you're on, you followed up on a question Kat had, where Kat called me out basically on something I forgot to talk about with regard to on-site generation and full netting, staying with the premises rather than go with the customers. Kat asked a question about what if they expand the generation. And again, in our tariff, it's explicit. Customers can expand their original generation up to 100% of the original capacity and still retain full net metering at the location. So that was, you touched on electrification and EVs, Lisa, and that's exactly why my understanding is why CEJA put that in there. They said, okay, we're going to be pushing so much more electrification for customers who have already installed DG, but are going to have emerging electrification needs. How do we support that? And so again, that's what, and again, Nikhil was involved in the docket. That's what we worked up. Said, okay, 100, double it, and you're good. You stay on full net metering. So
that's fantastic.
And for compensatory, I'm not 100% sure on the threshold, but there's a similar provision.
Thank you. That's a great distinction. That's exciting. Particularly as we look at customers who are originally at the 110% cap from a couple years ago, who are now electrifying, adding EVs, doing all kinds of things, and they're like, I want to add more panels to my house. How can I do that? That's great.
Yeah, I do know the 110% goes away, or it has gone away.
Yeah, that's gone. But the people who installed in that period,
right,
are now asking about expansion.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Lisa, for running all that down and for the utilities to Nikhil to confirm. So we're a little bit over time, and I do see the chat has slowed down a bit. We've also lost a few folks. Andrew, is there anything left that you feel is imperative that we address while we've got the team here today?
I think we've covered most, if not all, the questions in the chat. There are a few others that we had received that I don't think we got to. We apologize that if we didn't get to your question. One of the things that kept getting asked was if somebody wants to expand their system, under which net metering compensation model would the system be under? And I think the answer is the whole system, both the original and the new portion, would be under the new net metering rules. So that was the answer to that question for those of you who didn't see that. And yes, and unfortunately, I think we're out of time, but we will be following up with.
Andrew, could you just restate that again, because I may have misheard what you said. If they expand their system, anything up to 100
customer wants to expand their system.
The expansion, as long as it doesn't exceed 100% original capacity, stays under the current net metering where they get full retail netting. So if they're on full retail,
that clarification.
Yeah, so if they're on full retail netting now, by 12/31, right? We're counting everybody up to that 12/31 date. If any of those customers choose to expand their system anytime subsequent, And again, that comment and Ameren have similar language, that you can increase it up to 100% of the original size and still retain full net metering. So I just want to be sure that was clear.
That's a very useful clarification. That's contrary to what we were seeing in the chat. So I hope people make note of Peter's answer there. Thank you.
And that is for, I'm sorry, just one more clarification there. And that is for solar expansion, but if folks install storage, then they are on the new compensation method, correct?
No.
If they have solar and they install storage, no?
Don't care.
And this is for both utilities? Okay, yeah.
It's based on, we're looking at generation sources, right? So it's just, again, we're going off the nameplate of the generator. They would have to, if you install storage, you would have to go through an interconnection application again, because it is a potential new energy source behind there. But again, what we were looking at was size of generator at the premises. And if you increase storage, you're still not generating any more electricity than you were before. So we just said for the lifetime of the private generation facility, which is the generator itself, you can, as long as that nameplate does not increase more than 100%, you retain full net metering. So put in whatever storage you want to put in.
And I'll get clarification on the comment rules around that too, and send them out.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Yeah, we seem to have a lot of interest around that.
Yeah. Okay, I think we need to, I think we're losing folks left and right, including our presenters. So I think we do need to conclude. We will capture the chat and we'll take a look to see if there was anything that we missed. When we send out the recording, we'll also send a PDF of the slides and link to all of the different resources. And we will work with the utilities and to ensure that we address any additional questions that we didn't get to today. And of course, Andrew and I stand at the ready for folks who have additional questions that need clarification. Please feel free to reach out to us and we will work to get those questions answered for you. And thanks everybody for your engagement today and all of your time. I think we all learned a lot. Take care, everybody. Have a great afternoon.